A woman entered our police station at 3:23 a.m. and begged to be arrested. "What crime have you committed?" I asked. "None," she choked out, lungs recovering from her dash into the station. I frowned from behind the counter, readying myself for one of those nights. But it would be like no other night of my life. "Then why should I arrest you, ma'am?" The squirrely woman, catching her breath with hands against her knees, cranked her neck backwards so sharply that the joint popped. "Because," she said, taking a big inhale, "we're all in danger." Then her eyes began to ping frenetically between the station's entrance and me. I leant my elbows a little more deeply into the counter, pushing forwards to take a better peek at the building's automatic doors. There was nothing beyond the glass panes but the black of night and tarmac and silhouetted trees. "Is somebody following you?" I asked. She shook her bobblehead, making her neck pop another couple of times. I winced a little at the woman's frailty. She was slinging her skull around so violently that I started to wonder whether she wanted to launch it free. Pitch the damn thing for 6. "No, I'm just checking," she whispered, coming closer, "that we're alone. Now, I'm an officer of the law. I've faced men and women with twice and thrice the stature of this meek, frightened woman, so I don't know quite how to explain how or why I felt such terror in that moment. I was chilled by the woman's breath, or the words carried on it. "There are 3 other officers at the station tonight," I croaked before clearing my throat. "We're not alone." "Will those doors count?" she asked, shivering as she eyed the glass entrance again. "Count in what way?" I replied. "I need the smallest indoor space possible," she said. "He told me that I won't be able to exit a room or a building or a prison without spoken approval. He said I'd need permission to leave." "Who told you that?" I asked, befuddled. "I don't understand, ma'am. Explain what's happening." "Do I have to do something criminal?" the woman asked, shuddering. "You won't just arrest me?" "That's generally how it works," I replied. "I'm just a little concerned about why you want to be locked away this evening. Well, morning. I assume it has something to do with keeping yourself safe by getting off the street, given that you say you're in danger. However, jail cells aren't hotel rooms, so—" "I don't need to protect myself," she interjected with a hiss, wild eyes locking onto mine. "I need to protect all of you." "What's happening out here, Thatcher?" Officer Bowen asked as she emerged from the office behind me. I tried my damnedest not to gulp, but the unnerving woman was making it difficult for me. "This lady is asking to be arrested, but she says she hasn't committed a crime." Officer Bowen offered me a raised eyebrow, then put her hands on her hips as she looked at the woman. "What's your name, love?" "Tamsin," she said. "Please, will one of you lock me up?" "I need to be locked up. Something bad's about to happen." "What's about to happen, Tamsin?" asked Officer Bowen. "I don't know," the woman blubbered, placing her face in her hands. "It's inside me." Something about those words and her tone of voice instilled me with fear beyond anything words could describe, for it was a fear not of this world. Officer Bowen, on the other hand, seemed unamused. She leant towards my ear and whispered, "I think we need to get this lady some psychiatric help." "She might be in danger," I whispered back as Tamsin continued to cry. "She might be," Officer Bowen agreed, "but that's for a healthcare professional to decide, don't you think? Not 2 police officers at 3 o'clock in the morning." I nodded, then spoke louder. Tamsin, I'm going to leave you with Officer Bowen for a second whilst I make a call in the office. Okay? Tamsin shot her head up from her hands as I rose from the swivel chair. No, please, just arrest me. There isn't time for any of this. I need you to relax, Tamsin, Bowen said as I started to walk towards the office. We're going to help you, okay? We're going to figure out what's happening, together. I shut the office door behind me, then made the call. The idea was to avoid potentially upsetting or aggravating the distressed civilian. Bowen and I had no idea how she would react to the arrival of a mental health specialist, so it seemed best to keep that information to ourselves. The office overlooked the main entrance through a horizontal one-way window, so I watched Bowen and Tamsin talk whilst the phone rang. And when I made it through to a specialist, I explained the whole situation to her. She said that Tamsin was in need of a proper health assessment. I know it's late, I said, so I'm happy to escort her to the hospital. And then came a voice not quite her own. No, we'll escort you all. Before I managed to wrap my head around my unease at her sudden shift in vocal timbre, I clocked Tamsin smiling at me from the other side of the one-way window. She shouldn't have been able to see me, but I knew somehow that she could, and that filled me with terror. The grin on her face might have a thing to do with it too. Then the lights in the station cut out, and that came with a sharper pang of terror. The pain persisted afterwards, leaving me sitting in the dark, phone screen lighting my face, with an invisible blade lodged stubbornly between two bars of my rib cage. With the phone in my far from rigid hand, I rushed back out into the darkened area behind the counter. But Officer Bowen wasn't there, and when I shone my phone's torch beyond the counter, Tamsin wasn't there either. "Hello?" yelled a voice from down the corridor as fear started to grip me more tightly. A torchlight bounced down a distant corridor beyond the counter, painting the walls in light, offering only a slight reprieve from the suffocating darkness. Then came Officer Harling into the entryway. "Oh, Thatcher, thank God someone's here," he sighed, shining the torch beam onto me. "Looks like we've had a power cut." "There was a woman," I whispered, leaning against the counter once again, this time for emotional support. I was terrified, and I still wasn't quite sure why. "She's gone now. Bowen's gone too." "Huh?" Harling asked, not catching my drift. "Gone?" "I don't know. Where's Rodman?" I asked. Harling shrugged. "You're the first person I've found. Maybe we should check the fuse box. Or call—" He was interrupted by screaming, the voices of a man and a woman, from deeper within the station. "Bowen," I whispered. "Rodman," he added. I ran out from behind the counter and joined Officer Harling as we ran down a hallway that led into the heart of the station, desperate to locate the cries of our two fellow officers on the late-night shift with us. "This is Officer Harling," he panted as we ran down the corridor, "requesting backup. Power cut at the station and potential disturbance." "Roger," came a garbled voice from the other end of his radio. We burst through double doors and found ourselves in the station's break room. There we witnessed a horror I will never forget. Officer Bowen and Officer Rodman were both lying on one of the tables, sawn neatly in half a little above each of their pelvic areas. The light of Harling's torch caught the sheen of the blood and the table's laminated plastic top, and the whites of the victims' eyes. Their mouths hung open in the screams they had unleashed during those final seconds of life. I hoped, and still hope, their deaths were swift and relatively painless. But their expressions told another horrifying story, one that left me paralyzed in fear, vocal cords unable to expel a sound. Harling, on the other hand, screamed and rushed towards our severed officers, dropping his torch to the floor as he ran, plunging us back into darkness. I'd seen something for a moment at the back of the room. "Harling, pick the torch up," I begged, rummaging in my pocket for my phone. "They're gone," Harling sobbed, no longer the sturdy officer of the law I had known for 5 years, but a weeping mess. "Pick it up now, Harling," I insisted. I was a mess too, a jittery, terrified one. It wasn't sturdiness that kept me awake and alert, wasn't my duty to the law. I need Harling to pick up his torch because we weren't alone in that room. There came the slaps of flesh against the floor, and I hurriedly activated my phone's torch. Harling was gone. "Hello," I wheezed feebly, casting the torch around the room. "Whoever's in here, reinforcements are on the way, so—" "Roger," crackled a distorted voice from some unseen radio. "We'll escort you all." My stomach dropped as I realized that Harling's call hadn't made it through to anyone. That voice, inhuman and indistinct, did not belong to anyone or anything that wanted to help. It belonged to the voice I'd heard when I called the mental health care professional. There came more slaps from behind me, only a few, and when I spun my torch around, I expected to find nothing there once again. So I screamed when I saw her. Tamsin. Only she had changed. She showed only the whites of her eyes, rolling them ever deeper into the back of her head, and her mouth was impossible. It spanned the breadth of her face and then some. It had opened beyond human limits. And to add to that hellishness, it revealed not human teeth, but incisors of obscene length, narrow width, each tip tapered off to the finest point, which dripped with blood. And even the canines and molars to the sides were unthinkably sharp, unthinkably capable of cleaving a creature neatly down its center. "Do you want me to stay, officer?" the thing cooed, as if playing with its food. Then it charged towards me, and I screamed at a volume louder than my lungs were built to accommodate, screamed as I braced for death, screamed, "No!" Time feels a little hazy between that moment, which I expected to be my last, and the moment at which the responding officers found me. They said they'd arrived in 20 minutes, but it may as well have been hours, or perhaps only seconds. But she was gone when they got there and returned power to the building. I was interrogated about the demise of my fellow officers, including the disappearance of Officer Harling, who is a suspect in the case, along with Tamsin, the mystery woman visible on CCTV footage before the blackout. "The discrepancy between your story and the truth is curious," said one interviewer. "What discrepancy?" I asked. "Well, the power to the building was undoubtedly cut," he explained. "Yet, the automatic doors were standing open when backup officers arrived at the station." I felt my skin pale. He said I'd need permission to leave. Story 2. I grew up in rural Oregon, but got the hell out of Dodge as soon as I turned 18. My family was dirt poor, which actually helped me pick up a decent scholarship at U of O. Even though it was only a few hours from home, I barely visited, and when I graduated and got a job working on the new Hubble over in Colorado, I jumped at the chance. My older brother Frank never left. Frank and I were never that close. He had a mean streak, honestly. Once, as part of a game, he tied me up and told me to try to wrestle myself free. After I struggled for a few minutes and couldn't get loose, I asked him to untie me. But Frank just laughed and left me bound in the middle of our living room floor until our dad got home. When I explained what happened, my dad looked at me incredulously. He shook his head and said, "You're lucky he didn't do you worse." Lucky for me, I grew up big while Frank topped out at 5'5". Who knows what might have happened if he was the bigger one? The animals around our house weren't so lucky. When I was in 6th grade and Frank was a freshman in high school, he came running into the house one day, holding something bloody in his shirt. "Look, look, look," Frank kept mumbling. Then he knelt and unfurled his shirt so that its contents dropped onto the floor. It was a raccoon, its belly cut all the way down so that its guts were hanging out. It was mostly dead. Mostly. Its heart was still beating, and its lungs pulsed frantically. It reeked like fresh bile. "Get that out of here," I said, "before Dad sees it." By then, my dad's drinking had gotten worse, and he was done trying to talk sense into my brother. We all knew there was something broken in Frank, and my dad would try to beat it out of him for all of the good it ever did. "Wait," said Frank. "Look." He placed his full hand over the animal's snout and pulled up. As he did, the muscles of its neck pulled up. With its skin cut away, you could see where the tendons and muscles connected. "Cool, right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Cool, but get rid of it before Dad sees." The thing was, I wasn't as disgusted as I knew I should have been, and I didn't like that. Frank tossed the raccoon far in the back field for the coyotes to scavenge, and I cleaned up the blood it had dribbled onto the hardwood with dish soap and paper towels. As Frank got older, I wouldn't say he changed, but he at least got smarter about channeling his interests. He started hunting, almost always alone. He'd disappear for a weekend and come back with tremendous bucks, dripping blood out the back of his battered Chevy 1500. We had a back, unused garage where Frank would drain the meat and preserve the antlers, though he never got too great at either. Over time, I kind of realized Frank had zero interest in dead things. Once a deer was dead, it may as well have been a lump of dirt to him. What fascinated him was that line between life and death. My first memory is this. Frank, 6 years old, with a moth trapped in an overturned water glass, watching it beat its wings against the sides as it tried to reach the bare, overhead bulb that illuminated our bedroom. He flicked out light switch up and down, watching the little insect flurry with motion each time the light came on. I hadn't seen Frank in almost 10 years when I got the news my father had died at 54. Cancer in both the liver and the lungs, like smoking and drinking were racing to see which could kill him first. Frank picked me up from the Medford airport in the same Chevy he'd been driving since high school. Apparently, he'd gotten handy at fixing things since we'd been away and was eking out a living as a part-time mechanic. Honestly, he was nothing but nice to me. He took me by the old high school and to a pizza place he knew I'd used to like. He kept patting me on the arm or bringing me in for a one-arm hug, telling me how awesome it was to see me. I was starting to feel guilty that I hadn't kept in better touch. That night, we got drunk off what was left of our dad's supply and got to talking. Frank didn't ask a single question about what I'd done since I left town, just wanted to rehash old times. He asked me why I'd never come hunting with him. I said I always thought he preferred his solitude. No, he said. Everything was always better when we were together, when I had you to watch me. Listen, you want to head up and do some hunting with me tomorrow? Maybe it was the whiskey talking. I said I'd go with him. Sorry for rambling. I'm actually having a little trouble writing about what happened next, and I'm still exhausted. I'll try to post about it once I've gotten a good night's sleep. The morning after my return to town, I woke with a biting headache. In truth, I don't usually let myself drink alcohol. I don't like that feeling, that loss of control, and my work on the Hubble requires steady hands. In truth, I'm at my happiest right after I've donned my gear and stepped into the airlock outside the clean room, ready to start work. Once the HVAC whirs on and the air shower is done, I enter the lab. There, every piece of equipment is right where I left it. Everything in its right place, everything perfectly clean. By the time I'd hit the bathroom and showered, Frank was ready to go, dressed in his hunting gear, full camos, with a rifle slung over his back. He stood perfectly still by the window, watching leaves spiral in the wind. He offered me a similar set of clothes, but I knew there was no way I'd fit. Instead, I grabbed one of my dad's old, bright orange hunting jackets. In the hallway mirror, Frank and I made quite a pair. One hunter who wanted to be invisible, another who wanted to be seen. The drive up consisted of silence punctuated with staccato conversation. "Married?" Frank asked, and I shook my head. "You?" I asked, and he chuckled softly. As we drove up through the hills, I spotted a family of deer peering toward us from a nearby stand of trees. "Rats of the forest," said Frank. "You could kill a dozen a week and no one would miss them." "We hunting here?" I asked. Frank shook his head. "Farther up. Way out. Place those Forest Service goons won't bother us." I just missed out on $2 or $3 last weekend. Hell, we could probably bag all of them. All of them? I'd never seen my brother bring home more than one at a time. "You can't fetch them all back," he explained. "What did we ever do with them all? Whatever we don't want, we'll leave for the coyotes, just like always." He looked at me when he said that last part, and I knew what he was talking about. A few days after my 12th birthday, Frank came tearing into the house, smiling ear to ear. I'd never seen him so happy. I asked him what was going on, and he told me to follow him. That day, we hiked 2 miles down into a canyon near my house. It was raining, and we had to go slow to keep from slipping on the dirty, smooth rocks beneath our feet. I kept trying to ask Frank what he wanted to show me, but he kept his lips sealed. Finally, we rounded a bend, and I saw what had gotten Frank so excited. A man lay slumped against the canyon wall, barely breathing. He was handsome and clean-shaven, but a froth of white clung to the right side of his mouth, and a steady tremor ran through his body. His eyes focused on his, and I could tell he was trying to say something, but all that came out was a low gurgle. "Must have been hiking out here alone," said Frank. "Not too smart." He put a hand on the man's ankle, rolling up the jeans just slightly so Frank could touch the skin. The man flinched, as if trying to get away. "Try it," said Frank, taking his hand away. You can feel something. I swear. The man was starting to shake harder now. More froth foamed from his mouth. Does anyone else know you can out here today? I asked, and Frank shook his head. Frank grabbed the ankle again, a look of pure pleasure on his face. You've never felt anything like it, he said, but I shook my head. I couldn't let myself. We need to go, I said. He'll know our faces, said Frank. We need to stay. Make sure he's done for sure. It's not long now, I can tell. And so we stayed. It took 2 hours maybe, the whole thing. Eventually, the man's shaking got worse, and finally something seemed to catch in his throat, and his eyes went out. The whole time, Frank didn't let go of the man's ankle. You should have felt it, said Frank. Got to let the pressure out a little at once. Otherwise, we're getting out of here, I said. Now. A ranger found the body a few days later. Turned out to be a librarian, the dad of a kid a few years behind me in school. Prone to seizure, but he hadn't had one in years and must have figured he was safe. By the time they collected the body, a few scavengers had gotten to it. Frank turned off the main road onto a dirt one, and we rumbled downhill into a nearby valley. Have you ever felt another one go? I asked. Another person? Frank shook his head. Not so far, he said. Life, it only gives you so many chances like that. And it was true. When I think back on that day in the canyon, my primary emotion is regret. It took everything I had not to stoop beside my brother and touch the dying man's skin. What if I never got to feel what Frank did? At home that night, long after Frank had fallen asleep, I took a pillow into the bathtub at the far end of the house and screamed into it over and over again as I wondered what my brother's fingers had felt. The truck came to a stop, and Frank killed the engine right in front of a "No Trespassing" sign. He smiled. We're here. There were no trails where Frank led me, just an endless expanse of dead leaves under skeletal oaks, not so much as a deer path. Frank, though, charged ahead decisively, navigating the woods as expertly as if he'd lived here his whole life. Follow me, he said. I've got something to show you. Finally, we reached a clearing in a valley. As we approached it, a smell of rotting meat hit me, and the buzz of flies filled my ears. I pulled the top of my t-shirt up to cover my nose, but Frank inhaled deeply, reveling in the stench. Before us lay deer carcasses, maybe 300 of them. Some were fresh, dead less than a few weeks. Others were little more than bones, picked clean by scavengers and the elements. This was Frank's kingdom. I read a book about the way we used to live, started Frank. You read a book? I joked. At my feet lay a freshly killed fawn, its eye still intact. It held my reflection, distorted into nonsense. It was about prehistoric man, Frank continued. People back before we had guns, knives, bows, all of this garbage. We were scavengers. We'd see the buzzards circling far off, and we'd run that way. Eat whatever was left when we got there. That so? Frank shook his head. Can't say I believe it. Look around you, you see my work. I was born to be a hunter. Maybe that's evolution. You give the buzzards enough time, they turn into hawks, something like that. We gonna talk or hunt? I asked. Frank nodded and pointed to a nearby hill. The The ones I spotted last time were over there, he said. Let's go. We didn't find a single deer. Hours went by as we trudged through the dead leaves, trying to stay quiet. With each passing minute, Frank seemed to get more and more twitchy, like one of the flies had gotten under his skin. They were here, he muttered, 3 of the prettiest bucks you ever saw. Soon the sun was fading in the far mountains. Clouds gathered overhead, and the cold grew biting. "Where's the truck?" I asked, but Frank shook his head like he hadn't heard me. Suddenly he held up a hand, shushing me, and pointed down near the bone graveyard, now almost a mile away. "Down there," he said. "Movement. Thing must have circled right around us." "Funny. Smell usually drives them away." "Look," I said, "you can come back tomorrow." "Tonight," said Frank, turning from me, and before I knew it, he was running. I followed him as fast as I could, trying not to slide down the hill where the dirt was loose beneath the leaves. Soon, pinpricks of sweat gathered on my skin. They felt like acid in the cold. Finally, we reached the edge of the boneyard. Frank stood with his hands on his knees, panting from the run. He gestured toward the pile. Looking out, I saw something move ever so slightly. It was walking amongst the bodies, sniffing at them. Finally, it lifted its head, and a pair of magnificent antlers cast their silhouettes against the moonlit sky. "You do it," said Frank, and I raised my rifle. "I always like it better when it's you." I hadn't hunted since high school, but the muscle memory came back pretty quick. Quietly, I adjusted the scope and peered through it, putting the buck in the crosshairs. When I finally got a good look at the buck, though, I knew right away that something was off. First, there was its mouth. The whole left half was just gone. No muzzle, lips, or teeth, just a gaping maw. Its fur, too, was uneven, bald in patches and discolored, more like a patchwork quilt than a hide. The buck took a few steps to the side, and its movement sent a chill through me. It wasn't moving like a deer. Have you ever seen 2 men in a horse suit at Halloween, the way their movements feel out of step? "Shoot it," said Frank, but I hesitated. "There's something wrong," I said. "Now," he said. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the woods. It had been perfect, a clean heart shot. But the buck didn't move. It looked back at me, or it would have. Looking through the scope, I was suddenly certain that it had no eyes. Frank raised his rifle. "We should go," I said. He lined up the rifle and took his shot again. The deer did not fall. He shot again. A third time. This time the buck turned and disappeared into the woods at the far side of the clearing. Frank and I stood there for a few moments, not saying a word. "Come on," he finally said. "It must be hurt pretty bad. Can't have gotten far." "It's night," I said. "It's a long drive back." "We're not letting it get away," he shouted. "Now come on." I wish I'd told him no. God, I wish I'd told him no. Story 3. All right, that should just about sum it up. You got it from here? "Yep, not my first all-nighter," I said, raising my coffee mug. "Great. Keenan will be here to relieve you in the morning. Call me if you need anything." I flashed Mike a thumbs up as he turned to leave. "Oh, and Jeremy," he paused, his back still facing me. "Whatever you do, do not disturb the mannequins." I couldn't explain why, but a shiver rippled through me as soon as the words left his lips. What the hell was that supposed to mean? "Okay, got it." "Good. Best of luck to you, kid." He whistled to himself as he departed, the noise growing more distant as he sauntered down the hall. And then I was alone, left to my own devices for a whole 8 hours. I leaned back in my swivel chair, surveying the monitors one last time before pulling out my phone and opening Reddit. Get paid to listen to music and read scary stories all night? Count me in. I mean, nothing happens in an empty mall after closing, right? Wrong. As I plopped down in my seat, third cup of Maxwell House in hand, I caught movement out of my periphery. I groaned. Of course, my first night on my own and some stupid teenagers had probably broken in. Well, I was right. Camera 5 showed 2 teen boys and a girl, dressed from head to toe in black, creeping down the empty hallways. I scoffed. What were they even looking for? All the stores were locked up tight. I leapt to my feet. I knew their exact location. I could cut them off if I was quick enough. I bolted down the desolate corridors, past rows upon rows of vacant brick-and-mortar outlets. A chill undulated through me as I ran. The place looked different at night. It felt like I shouldn't be there, like something sinister lurked around every corner, between every nook and cranny, waiting for the perfect opportunity to pounce. I attempted to steady my breathing as I reached the staircase. There they were. If those little thugs thought they could get past me, they had another thing coming. I tiptoed behind them, quiet as a church mouse, accidentally eavesdropping on their conversation. Hey, I might not be the most upstanding guy out there, but I don't meddle if I don't have to. How much further, Marcus? This place gives me the creeps, the girl said, her eyes darting anxiously from side to side. Should just be up here on the right, the shortest of the boys responded. Cool. Everyone remember the plan. Marcus and the girl nodded. Okay, let's just go over it again. To be sure we have it right, you know? Nate, you forgot it, didn't you? You've always had a horrible memory, the girl teased, earning her a spiteful glare. Oh, shut up, Laney. You're only here because Marcus has a crush on you. Even in the dim moonlight, I could see that both of their cheeks were blossoming with color. It filled my heart with a strange sort of nostalgia, and honestly, it almost made me forget why I was there. Almost. That's not true, okay? Just tell me what you think the plan is already, Marcus huffed, staring at his feet. Fine, but just for the record, I know you're lying. So you two lovebirds go to Dillard's to find your brother, while I run this way and set off an alarm to distract that dumbass security guard. Then, hey, who are you calling a dumbass? I clasped Nate and Marcus by the shoulders and spun them around. The terrified expressions painted on their faces sent a smug grin inching across my lips. Suddenly, white-hot pain streaked through my cheek. I was seeing stars. One of those little shits had sucker-punched me. Without a word, they darted away, leaving me rubbing my throbbing face. I quickly regained my composure and shot after them. I didn't know what I was going to do when I caught up to those three, but I did know that they were never going to set foot in that mall again if I had anything to do with it. We all sprinted like Olympic athletes. I was fueled by rage. As for them, fear. I was rapidly gaining on them. 10 feet, 8 feet, 6 feet. I was almost able to reach out and grab them. Then we came to an intersection. Without hesitation, Nate and Laney took a left, while Marcus swerved right. I had a split-second decision to make. Ultimately, I reached the conclusion that 2 was better than 1, and I hung a left. I smirked to myself as I again began to close the gap. I knew that hallway. It led to a dead end. Give up now, ya assholes. I'm feeling generous. If you throw in the towel, I'll let you walk out of here scot-free. It was an obvious lie, but I had to try something. The quicker I got them out of there, the better. They didn't respond. In fact, I think they managed to pick up the pace, but they wouldn't be able to hold out forever, and they knew it. Nate and Laney glanced at each other knowingly as the 3 of us skidded to a halt, and again, they split up, trying to zip past me. For the second time that night, I had a choice. "Tricky little bastards," I muttered, opting to go after Nate. I cut him off, grabbing his arm. "Gotcha! You're coming with me," I said, dragging him by the collar. "Ow, you don't have to be so rough." I chuckled wryly. "Don't have to be so rough, huh? I wish you fuckers had been thinking that when you gave me this," I snarled, pointing to the dark purple bruise blossoming on my cheek. "Okay, point taken. Just loosen up a little bit, all right?" I reluctantly obliged, still maintaining a firm grip on his shirt. I paused, looking him in the eye. "All right, kid. I know you're just some stupid teenagers who got in way over their heads. I'll consider leaving the police out of this if you take me to your friends. Deal?" A spark of fear flashed across his pupils. He mulled it over before begrudgingly meeting my gaze. "Fine. I didn't want to come here anyway. We need to go to the food court first." As we came into view of the dining area, I couldn't help but shiver. Everything looked so barren at night, whereas in the day the food court would have been bustling with customers. It was now eerily quiet. Nate led us straight to Panda Express. The sign loomed ominously above us, casting an unsettlingly dark shadow on the tiled flooring below. "Why are we here? Hate to break it to you, but there's no one on duty to cook your orange chicken and lo mein." Nate scowled at me before calling out into the darkness. "Laney, you can come out now." A pair of blue eyes peeked up at us before hurriedly ducking back behind the counter. "Not with him out there." "Laney, it's okay. He said he won't call the cops on us. We'll be fine." She timidly rose, blonde curls bouncing atop her shoulders. "Are you sure?" A twinge of annoyance percolated Nate's features. "Come on, you know I'm not a liar. Just get out here." Laney hesitantly shuffled over to us, staring at the ground. "Fine, let's get Marcus and go home. I don't like this place." "Lead the way," I said, extending a hand. They shot me a collective glare before obeying. We walked in silence past vacant stands and shops. I couldn't bring myself to look inside the windows. I glanced down at Nate. I'd forgotten that I still had an iron grip on his collar. "If I let go of you, are you going to run?" "No." "We're already caught. What's the point?" I released him and he adjusted his shirt. I stuffed my hands in my pockets and slowly mustered up the courage to ask the question that had been burning away at my conscience since I'd first encountered the trio. "So why did you 3 come here? I can tell that you're not bad kids." "You're here for a reason." The pair shot each other a stern glance. Laney nodded. Nate sighed, then spoke. "Marcus has a brother who used to work here. He went missing a few months ago. They say he stayed too late one night. That they got him. There's rumors about this place, you know, about the mannequins." He shivered before continuing. Well, Marcus's brother, Max, had obviously heard them. He was skeptical, so he decided to find out firsthand if they were true. They say that the mannequins come to life after midnight, that if you get unlucky enough to come face to face with them when they do, they'll claim you as one of their own. My heart pounded against my ribcage like a jackhammer. If Nate was spinning a story, he sure was doing a good job. So what? You think your friend's brother is a mannequin? That's just about the most insane thing I've ever heard. Look, I didn't say that I believe it, okay? Marcus dragged us here so he could try to talk to his brother again. Well, he dragged me here. She came on her own. Nate smirked. Lainey blushed, twirling a blonde lock of hair between her fingers. I did not. You did too. You butted into our conversation at school the other day. I know you just wanted some alone time with Marcus because you like him, Nate said, making a smoochy face. That's enough, you two. This is it, right? The three of us stood there gaping at the faded Dillard's sign overhead. A sense of trepidation crawled up my spine. I never thought I'd see the day where I was so apprehensive to walk into a clothing store, but there I was. My gaze shifted to the metal gate closing off the shop from the rest of the outlet. It was cracked open. How'd he get in there? I muttered. Something told me that I shouldn't speak too loudly. The key was with Max's stuff. They gave it to Marcus's family. I nodded. That checked out. Well, I guess you two should wait out. A deafening shriek emanated from the bowels of the darkness before me, sending fear coursing through my veins like venom. Stay here. I didn't have to tell them twice. I squeezed through the gap in the fencing, sweat pooling above my brow. I don't know what I expected to find, but it definitely wasn't that. I darted between clothing racks, desperately searching for the source of the terrified wail. It didn't take me long to find it. I froze, struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Marcus was being dragged along the floor by an army of stark white figures. The mannequins were moving, all by themselves. Their limbs creaked as they walked, those emotionless polystyrene faces sending my heart into overdrive. No, this couldn't be real, but it was, and I had to do something. Please. I know you're still in there. Don't do this. I love you, Max. Please. Marcus's shrill cries shattered my heart. He only wanted to see his brother again. And unfortunately for him, his wish came true. They didn't react. I squinted, tracing their trajectory. They were taking Marcus to the storage room. I had to stop them. Hey, put him down, you freaks. I cringed at how brittle the words came out. Their heads whipped toward me. Two of them were cocked to the side like curious dogs. They were studying me, sizing me up. Marcus's eyes shimmered with hope. I'm warning you, put him down, I shouted, brandishing my flashlight. I was seriously regretting leaving my personal taser at home. They stared at me blankly for a tense moment before the lead mannequin pointed a plastic finger at me. I was paralyzed with fear as two of the monstrosities charged toward me at an inhuman speed. I failed to will my legs to move in time. The pair crashed into me, sending us sprawling to the floor. No! Leave him alone! Marcus yelled, to no avail. The mannequins wrapped their rigid fingers around my arms, effectively immobilizing me. I thrashed and flailed, but they were ridiculously strong. They effortlessly picked me up, carrying me to the entrance. I was forced to watch as Marcus and I grew further and further apart, his panicked whimpers fading into the distance. I suddenly found myself sitting outside of the store, staring up at the ghostly white figures lurking among the inky black. One of the mannequins slammed the gate shut. My heart plummeted into my stomach as I heard the lock click into place. Without a word, they disappeared back into the depths of the shop. Nate rushed over to me, grabbing a fistful of my shirt. "What happened, man? Where's Marcus?" Tears began to blur my vision. I'd failed them. "He's gone." Lainey spoke up, startling me. "No, there has to be something we can do. I mean, maybe we could call the police or I don't know, anything. We can't just leave him here," she cried, unable to contain her tears any longer. Nate let me go, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She's right. There's got to be something we can do," he said, with fire brimming in his piercing green irises. I solemnly shook my head. "No, you saw those things. I promise you I will do everything in my power to get your friend back. In the meantime, I need you two to leave. Go home." "No, Look at me," I said, locking eyes with Nate. "The best thing that you can do to help Marcus right now is to get yourselves out of here. I'll do what I can. Okay?" He averted his gaze, staring holes into his feet. "Okay, we're depending on you. All of us. Let's go, Lainey." "But Lainey," he said, his cold visage silencing her. "Fine. But we will be back," she said, wiping her wet cheeks. I sighed, pulling out my phone as the teens dejectedly shuffled away. "Hey, Mike. Yeah, it's Jeremy." "What's wrong, kid? Didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "Mike, there's been an incident. Some teenagers snuck in and the mannequins. They took one." "Shit. Okay, I'll tell Keenan that I'm taking his shift tomorrow. Lock yourself in the office. I don't think I need to tell you this, but do not come out until morning. Got it?" "Yeah. See you soon." I spent the remainder of my shift on pins and needles, meticulously scanning the cameras. Every so often I could see a flash of white streak across one of the store windows. Morning couldn't come soon enough. Mike trudged through the door an hour before opening. He stoically met my gaze before turning around. "Come on." I led him back to Dillard's in silence. Golden sunlight glinted off the metal as Mike unlocked the gate. How many were there? 5. Dread seeped into my bones as we passed several of the motionless statues. Now that I really had a chance to drink in their features, the mannequins looked strangely detailed. A slender man with long, wavy hair, a portly woman with an afro, a muscular, hulking figure with bulging veins. "I've counted 5 so far," Mike said as we continued on. "Me too." As we made our way to the back of the store, my breath caught in my throat. There stood a small white mannequin. Its mouth was open in a permanent scream, and its frozen fingers clawed at its cheeks. If you're reading this, stay far away from the mall at night, because if you're not careful, you just might add another mannequin to its collection. Story 4.